你要去哪里呀？你要去哪里呀？ I had just finished an 8-week intensive immersion Mandarin Chinese program, and I had no idea what my taxi driver was saying. I hand him the little slip of paper with the address written in Chinese and English, and we're on our way. We leave the airport, we enter the city. The buildings look hastily constructed. It's kind of gray and kind of dirty. Day 1 of my 10-month fellowship, given to me by the Luce Foundation. It's given to Understanding of Asia to Potential Leaders in American Society. Here I am. I'm in Taipei. It takes me forever to find an apartment. Apparently, in 1999, there is no market for one-bedroom apartments in Taipei. Everyone thinks I'm nuts. Are you sure you want to live by yourself? Aren't you going to be lonely? It's really not safe for women to live all alone. But eventually, a friend of a colleague finds someone with an apartment next to Sun Yat-sen Memorial Park, and I move in. It's September. It's still hot. It's nighttime, and I'm asleep. And I'm jerked awake. I think I'm vomiting. There's this roaring in my ears. I don't know what is going on. And then I realize this is nothing like the tremors that I felt as a teenager in Los Angeles. This is a full-blown, massive earthquake. The furniture is sliding around. There's a lamp over the kitchen table. It's swinging wildly. Things are smashing. I roll out of bed. I crawl, kind of fall down this little flight of stairs leading from the bedroom to the living room because I want to barricade myself behind the couch. And I basically pull the couch on top of myself so that the windows, if they smash, the glass won't fall on me and time stops. And then it's over. And it's eerily quiet. But I know enough to know there will be aftershocks, and they might be big, so I have a decision. Do I stay here, or do I go down to the park? And I decide to stay put, and I wait. I try to make a phone call, but it doesn't go through, and I wait. And finally, outside the window, it's getting to be that sort of pre-dawn gray, and I can see that there are people congregating in the park. So I go join them. And I can't speak to any of them, but it feels good to be near people. Now, in Taiwan, it was the second biggest earthquake they'd ever had. In Taipei, we were really lucky because we were 90 miles to the north of the epicenter. It was a 7.7 magnitude earthquake. Mountainsides crumbled. Thousands of landslides, villages buried. Over 2,400 people died. Over 11,000 people were injured, and 100,000 people were left homeless. Now, in the international news, the two pictures that kept ricocheting everywhere were of the only 2 buildings that collapsed in Taipei. So my family's freaking out. I call them finally. I say, it's not that bad here. I'm okay. Everything's okay. Weeks pass. I jump every time there's an aftershock, and there are a lot of them. Or every time a truck rumbles by, because I actually can't tell the difference. I'm that keyed up. And that's how it started. I settled in. I felt like the ground wasn't quite solid under my feet. I didn't really trust it. So I spent 16 months in Asia that time, and it profoundly changed me. It fuels me to this day, the experiences I had. And what were the things that changed for me? And why? Why did that change me? Well, I think it's because I was dropped into the pure unfamiliar. I had no context. All the systems were opaque to me. It was like a crash course in beginner's mind. And I had to be hyper aware. I had to listen so closely so I could catch the cues. And I was a witness most of the time, wide open. I had to be totally comfortable with stepping into the unknown over and over and over again. And I had to trust that people would catch me because I really didn't know what was going on most of the time. And I had to get really comfortable with being really uncomfortable. So in Taiwan, I spent my time in 2 dance companies. I studied Chinese, and I traveled. And after my fellowship was over, I didn't go home. I was really curious about China. So I went to Beijing, and I crossed China overland. I went to these Tibetan areas. I crossed the Taklamakan Desert all the way to Kashgar. I was in Central Asia, on the border with Tajikistan and Afghanistan. And on a whim, I crossed into Pakistan over a pass there, a high mountain pass. And I thought, I'll just check it out and then leave from Islamabad for like a week. Well, I stayed for 6 weeks. It was so fantastic. I went to Naltar Valley, Hunza Valley. I went deep into the Hindu Kush Mountains. And yes, it's where the Taliban was gaining in strength. I went to the Himalaya. Finally, I did go home. I flew from Islamabad to Paris. And in Paris, I was promptly detained by the American authorities. Ma'am, what were you doing in the Northwest Frontier Province for so long? I was so grateful to be a petite, blonde, French-American woman. I was hiking. I don't have a beard. So then I flew and landed in New York City. I was home. And I experienced the most profound culture shock. And it wasn't just because I was used to using chopsticks all the time and found forks really awkward. It was like I had this weird sensation of being able to see things, see the subtext of things, see the assumptions that normally we don't notice. It was like a superpower. Now, when you go up a mountain over 10,000 feet, 15,000 feet, your body creates extra red blood cells to compensate for the lack of oxygen. So when you go back down to sea level, you're turbocharged. And that's what I felt like. I felt turbocharged in my ability to distinguish the universal versus the specific, the arbitrary versus the special in our culture, in our political systems, in our institutions, and in my life. And then life came, and I built a career in the contemporary performing arts. I moved to the Hudson Valley eventually, after working with international projects and teams. I met my husband. I started a family. It was a dream. And the years, they slid by. Fast forward to November 2016, which for many of us felt cataclysmic. And for me, like for you maybe, I was in shock. It was like culture shock in my own country. I didn't recognize things. I felt, I've been asleep. I was lulled by my life. I've been asleep. And now I get jerked out of sleep. There's a roaring in my ears. It's like another earthquake. And I feel disbelief. I feel fear. I feel rage. And everybody is in a rage, even the winners. And I think, how could we have done this? How could we be so desperate, so polarized, so mad that we would hand the presidency of the most prosperous and powerful nation the world has ever known to someone like Trump? The ground ripped open from under my feet. And I said, something's got to change. And the only thing I have control over is me right now. And I know I can't make theater right now. So, fast forward to now. I have the privilege of working on systems change. And I do that in different ways and with the Good Work Institute. And the question that really drives me today is pretty specific and also pretty big, which is how do we build a regenerative economy? Not an extractive one, not one that takes more than it gives, not one that crushes people for profit, not one that rewards corruption. We're feeling the aftershocks of 2016, but of other things too. So, how are we going to do that? How are we going to build a new system? Well, we need to start with us. I think we need to start, first of all, by seeing the system that we're in. We need to make it unfamiliar to us so that we can build a new system, so we can imagine a new system. We need to listen to each other, despite differences, and that might feel a little shaky sometimes. And we need to act in concert with wisdom. We are not human resources. So at the Good Work Institute, we think big and we work locally. We take inspiration from things like emergence, tactics of community organizing, even complexity theory. And then we actually support projects by people in the Hudson Valley who are crafting and testing solutions. And then we nurture relationships. And we foster democratic processes in our businesses and in our communities. But I know what you're thinking. What about the old system? What about the old system? It's powerful, it's entrenched, and it is desperately holding on. Tom Goldtooth of the Indigenous Environmental Network said, "Why is it so much easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism?" Right? So imagining a new world, that's the work we need to do. Building that new world, that's the work that we need to do. And the only way we're going to do it is together, with deep relationships, courage, imagination, and audacity. I have one last story to share from my time in Asia, which I think demonstrates what it might feel like to do that. I'm in Nepal. I'm hiking. I'm going up a valley that very few people go to. And as I get to the last lodge, it's beautiful. A wide open, wild, cold, almost desolate place where the peaks are so high that when I first see them, I say, that's gotta be a cloud. And I've been waiting for the weather to clear, and morning comes, the clouds have lifted, the real clouds. And I grab my backpack and my camera, and as I leave the breakfast room, the guys are joking with me, better not get gored by a yak. And it's real because a Japanese guy actually had that happen. So I leave, I start walking up the valley, and up ahead I see that soon it's gonna get steep. I'll have a choice. Do I wanna climb that? I mean, it's not Mount Everest, but you know, it's over 12,000 feet. And I see far in the distance a yak mother and her baby. And it's so picturesque. These two animals punctuating the emptiness. So I take out my camera, I focus, click. And at that distance, the yak mother's head rears up and she looks right at me and she is pissed. I freeze. There is nothing around me. There is nowhere to hide. There's not even one tree. I slowly start backing away. She lowers her head. She pushes her baby behind her. She starts pawing the earth. Oh shit. She charges. She stops 25 feet away. I say to myself, be small. Be non-threatening. Be unobtrusive. She charges again, and this time it's pure instinct. I whip my backpack off my back, throw it in an arc over my head, and I give out this scream. No, it's a roar, a primordial yop, and I go, roar! And she stops 15 feet away. And we're looking at each other. And I try and look as big and threatening as possible. I'm gonna kick your ass. And she looks at me and says, you're not worth it. And she walks away. So we are facing the yak right now. She's charging. We need to act. We need to make some noise. So please stand up. And join me. After 3, we will make a primordial yop that's gonna blow the roof off of this place and let the universe know that we're coming. 1, make it loud. 2, make it count. 3, yeah!